Now, Etsy does require us to make a product right away. So we can have our first listing here, our first product, which by the way, you can remove this and do whatever you want later. You can also add many more products, but let's start off with a legitimate first product here. And the first category, it's going to be a physical product. I'm going to sell, let's say a candle. Let's say candle and candles. We see that right there as the correct category. We can then scroll down. We can say, I made this candle. You can also have somebody in your shop made this candle or another company or person. Down here, it is a finished product, or it could be a supplier tool to make things. So for example, if you're selling a digital file that is maybe the plans to build bunk beds or something like that, or maybe just it's a template that somebody could use to sew a pillowcase. I don't know, anything like that. That would be supplies or tools, whereas this is a finished product. Now we can say, when did you make it? Well, you can make it to order. So as people order them, if it's custom, that would make sense. Or you can say, I made this within the past 5 years. Etsy then wants to know a little bit about how you made it. So it's a natural material, or it's made from scratch, or maybe it's just something that your shop alters. So maybe you buy, leather-bound books and you just engrave them on the top to have a nice burn on them, or something like that. So look through this, make sure you choose the right one, and then we're going to scroll down and we made this with handheld tools. An AI generator can't make a candle as far as I know. And we can also add production partners down here. If you want to know more about this, just click on, is this required for you? This should answer a lot of questions about, depending on what you're making, is this your category? In summary though, that's going to be like if you come up with the design and you have somebody else print it on t-shirts or tote bags or tea towels, something like that, then that's a production partner who's making them. Now we can say save and continue. And by the way, we'll talk about other styles of products. I'll talk about digital products later besides just this one, but we can add some more details. So let's come up with a title for this product, and we can have up to 140 characters. And this is a really big factor in your search engine optimization. So SEO is essentially how you can rank on Etsy, how people can find your product. And you don't want to just have a simple like globe candle, right? You want this to really have a lot more detail. That is what is most likely going to be searched by people on Etsy. So perhaps I want to call this all natural globe candle, and then have a little separator and have some more descriptions in the title of this product. All right, so this one might be a little overkill. I have almost all 140 characters, but I'm really loading up with keywords of what I think people might search. And depending on the product you're selling, you may want this to be even phrases that you think people are looking for. So maybe like good gift for husband, or anything that people might be searching for that's more descriptive than just 1 or 2 words may be a good idea. And there are tools out there, for example, Google Trends could help you decide between, do people type in globe candle or earth candle and see what's actually being searched more, and that could be very helpful. Now down here, we have photos and videos. I recommend adding as many as you can. Having all 10 photos I think is extremely valuable, and I'll talk about how to take good photos later on in the video, but for right now, I'm gonna have all of these. Minus that one. And honestly, for the sake of growing your business, I really recommend getting a video of some sort on here. So let me just show you a quick example. So the other day I was just looking at beekeeping stuff. I'm just getting into beekeeping, and on Etsy, if I scroll down like this one right here, look at that. So that has a video. They're selling plans to build your own beehive. And I think when you're hovering over these, like see how this doesn't change? This one has some other photos, but if it doesn't change, it doesn't catch your eye. And if you're moving your mouse and you see a video there, it's just a lot more descriptive. It shows the customer what it is. And you can see people who have a video have twice as many orders with those listings compared to ones who just have photos. And less than 28% of sellers have listings with the video. So this does really give you an advantage. The video doesn't have to be anything crazy. You might want to go on Amazon and buy a little, let me get one. Buy a little turntable as I did. These are pretty cheap on Amazon, and you can just set your product in the top, push a button, and it'll just gradually spin, and you can just take a simple little video of your product spinning right there. Otherwise, you could take maybe an iPhone video of your product in a nice little setup and show what it looks like. Obviously, it depends on what your product is, but having some video to show all angles of your product, how it works, what the material is. You don't need to have audio, but just showing your product is very beneficial. Now we can rearrange these photos, by the way. So the first one is going to be your thumbnail. That's the first image people see of your product. That's really the first impression as well. But if we wanted, say, this one to be the first impression, we can drag it over to the left, and the leftmost one is going to be our thumbnail. Now I actually really like this photo better, so I'm gonna put that one there. And we can adjust it down here and adjust thumbnail. So if you want it a little more punched in, so you can really see what the product is, that might be a good idea. And we can say apply. Now, because this is an example store, I didn't actually spend the time to write a description, but I did have ChatGPT write one. I don't recommend you do the same. You could use this format though. I think the format's not bad, but you want to make sure it's human written. I think that's really going to convince people more to buy your product. And also, you don't want to have a bunch of paragraphs. I really recommend having a bulleted list. And probably the best thing to do is just look at what the competitors who are selling very well, look at what their format is for the description. So if we scroll down on this one, you can see if it's something more technical like this, they might have a bulleted list telling you like what's actually like, page 1, page 2. But because we're selling candles, let's check out a candle one. This one seems to be selling quite well. And if you scroll down, you'll see they have a little paragraph about how long it burns. They talk about what it's made of, the scents, what it's going to really smell like, and really important down here, candle details. You want to have as much detail as possible in here so that customers know what they're buying, the size of it, is it natural, is it not natural, the dimensions. That way you don't have as many returns, you don't have angry customers, and you don't have negative reviews because the image was maybe it made it look larger than it was. Having these descriptions that really have a lot of details on there, you see this on Amazon as well, really are quite important. And now we can add personalization. So if you want to have something engraved on there, maybe a name, if you're doing print on demand style products and you can have somebody, have like their wedding date, for example, on a print, you can have that right here and you can choose how customizable it is going to be. So are you going to have up to 1,024 characters, which is, a lot of characters if you want to have something longer there, or is it going to be something that's like a monogram? Maybe you just have 3 letters you can accept and you can have that there. So I'm going to remove personalization. We don't want that on this candle. And then we can have our price. So let's call this price, let's say $17.49. And they show us our estimated profit as well after the fees from Etsy. And you can say, all right, our cost on this is actually $7.23. And they'll say, all right, your profit after Etsy fees now is $8.15. The quantity, we can go up to $9.99. So I'm going to say that's what we have. Of course, depending on your inventory, you don't want to sell more than you have and then have angry customers. So put that in accordingly. I usually just go for higher numbers though. We can add variations. So if you want to have different colors, if you want to have different sizes, different heights, different scents. So let's do different scents on this one. The first one could be maybe see if we have lavender. I'm going to create custom ones actually. So cedar, I want the ones that they're suggesting are a little bit not as, they're a little bit less detailed than I would like. So I'm going to say done. We can have variable prices on these, variable quantities and variable SKUs or stock keeping units. So we can say apply. In that way for each one, we could say, all right, the floral one is going to be maybe the same price. So maybe it's $18.99, $18.99. And maybe this one, the cedar, is an extra $1. Now you don't need to have stock keeping units necessarily when you're getting started, but if you have multiple products and you scale up to have like a small warehouse, then yeah, SKUs are actually quite valuable in tracking products, especially when they're in a closed box. Now, because we categorized this as a candle, the questions down here are relevant to the candle. Of course, yours is going to have something different here. It's not going to ask the wax type, but this is a beeswax candle, and I'm going to enter this information. And then finally, we have tags and materials down here. We can add up to 13 tags. And this, again, is a good idea to check out what other people are using for tags. And to find that, you can go down to explore related searches on any product. And generally, that's going to be the tags you're using. So candle, maybe we'll use beeswax candle, self-care. So now we have 13 tags. We can add our materials here. And then, of course, shipping, we can select profiles or create individual ones for each product. I'm going to say select profile. We don't have a profile yet for shipping, so I'll create a new one. We can say custom range and just say maybe like 1 to 8 days for shipping. That way, just in case it gets here sooner, it's kind of nice, but set expectations. It could be up to 8 days. What countries are we shipping to? You could say, hey, maybe this is only, let's deselect that, and only North America. Maybe that's what we want just for simplicity. Maybe even Canada, right? We can do that, and maybe Puerto Rico as well. If we look at the shipping services, they have quite a few here. And if you go to advanced ones, they have USPS media mail, and we have parcel ground. So just like the basic, USPS ground. These are all going to be a little faster. That's the real slow one. And we could have free domestic shipping, or we could have free international shipping, or you could have a handling fee as well and say, okay, when you're shipping, you got to factor in like your packaging and your tape. So maybe we're going to say like 45 cents. Save shipping profile. And now it will calculate everything for you whenever somebody's buying based on where they are and how much it's actually going to cost to ship to them. We can choose the weight now and the overall box size. And for customs information, you can add a tariff number. You can Google that separately if you are shipping internationally and depending on what your product is. And you can check out some previews right here. So if they live in maybe Denver, it's going to cost them $8.19 to ship it. So you could say, that's kind of expensive actually. Maybe you need to adjust your pricing accordingly, and work with that. And then for renewal, it'll automatically renew for 20 cents each time if you want, or you can manually do it. I'm going to manually do it for now, and we can save and continue. Forgot the return policy. Let's apply this policy. They just suggest one right there, 30-day policy. I will say save and continue. You could build your own policy if you don't want that one. There we go. So we have our first listing. We could add more listings now or do it later. We're going to do that later. I want to talk about other listings, but let's get this up and running. And by the way, I think it's really important that you don't get what's called paralysis by analysis. If you're building your store, it's very easy to get sucked into this perfectionism where you really want to make the photos perfect, really make the description perfect. But ultimately, what somebody told me early on in my business career was the best way to succeed in business is to be in business. In other words, you can only learn so much from the sidelines. You learn so much more by actually getting in there and testing out products. So if you spend a month perfecting your images or 2 months perfecting those images, and then you start, you list the product finally after all that work, only to find out it doesn't really sell well, or somebody else launches one sooner and undercuts you. So the idea here is that you want to get your product out. You want to have a full product. You don't want to have like a half-baked product, but you want to get it out as quickly as you can just to have something on the market, and you can iterate on this. You can make better products, you can make better listings, and you can tweak your listing as well. But don't spend too much time. Don't get hung up on perfectionism.